Welcome back to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you with us today because, well, we're looking at something truly chilling. Today, we're conducting an autopsy of a nightmare. We are diving into a deeply terrifying supernatural case study drawn straight from a newly curated horror narrative. We're going to break down a story that involves a missing grandfather, a seriously cursed inheritance, and a farmhouse that, quite frankly, should have stayed permanently abandoned. It's dark, it's incredibly atmospheric, and today we're going to examine exactly how an ancient evil slowly takes hold of a completely ordinary situation. So, it all begins with a very simple yet deeply unsettling question. What happens when you open a book that was never ever meant to be read? You know, it's a classic horror trope, right? The ultimate do not touch button. But the source material we're analyzing today executes this concept with just terrifying precision. It forces us to ask what we would actually do if we stumbled upon something ancient, something purposefully hidden away. As we'll see, curiosity doesn't just kill the cat in this scenario, it unleashes something absolutely catastrophic. I want to set the stakes right out of the gate with this exact quote directly from the text. By sunrise, only one thing would survive the fire, and it wasn't human. There is just such cold, harsh finality in that statement, isn't there? Right from the jump, we know for a fact that this is not a story with a happy ending. We are walking into a tragedy, a fiery conclusion where humanity loses and something far, far darker wins. Just keep this endgame in the back of your mind as we trace the steps that led up to this horrific sunrise. Okay, let's dive into this. Picture this incredibly jarring contrast. On one hand, you have a perfectly serene setting. We're talking just outside a small town in New Zealand, completely surrounded by endless pine forests, towering hills, and a deep, totally silent lake. Sounds like an absolute paradise, right? But juxtaposed against that beautiful landscape is a seriously chilling reality: an empty wooden farmhouse with the front door just left wide open. A mail carrier arrives one afternoon to deliver a package to an elderly man named Richard. He calls out, but nothing. Dead silence. Richard has simply vanished without a single trace. Tracing the timeline of events here, the authorities really do try everything. Day 1, the house is found empty. Then, for 3 solid weeks, police scour every single inch of that property. They comb through the surrounding pine forests, they drag that silent lake, but they find absolutely zero clues. Nothing. So by week 4, Richard is officially declared dead. And that legal finality brings us to month 2, where Richard's 25-year-old granddaughter Mia flies in all the way from Los Angeles. She's inherited the farmhouse, and she arrives with a very straightforward, practical plan. Clean the place up, organize the paperwork, sell the property, and get right back to her life in LA. We've all had to tackle a daunting cleaning project at some point, and Mia's totally mundane task proceeds exactly as you'd expect. She spends the entire day clearing out the rooms until only the garage remains. It's packed with old fishing gear, rusty tools, and wooden crates resting on these dusty, ignored shelves. But it's here, tucked behind the very last shelf, intentionally hidden away from the world and wrapped super tightly in a mysterious black cloth, that Mia discovers a heavy, ancient book. Now, what's really interesting about this is the literal anatomy of the artifact. This isn't just some old diary. The cover is bound in stitched, dark leather. In the very center, there is a horrifying face surrounded by a circular symbol made of twisted tree roots. And when Mia actually opens it, every single page is covered in these dark red symbols. The illustrations inside are basically the most twisted horror pics you could possibly imagine. Towering monsters emerging from thick fog, upside-down trees, and dozens of strange eye-like symbols that the text specifically notes felt somehow alive. It's a masterclass in terrifying visual world building. You can practically feel the dread seeping right out of those pages. Drawn in by just how bizarre the book is, Mia makes a completely fatal mistake. I mean, have you ever done something super small that instantly felt catastrophic? Pro tip, if a book looks like it was bound in pure evil, maybe don't read it out loud. But without even realizing what she's doing, she speaks the strange words. The literal second she finishes the final sentence, an intense burning sensation shoots through her fingers and she violently slams the book shut. But it's too late. As this quote highlights, she looks down to see thin black lines spreading beneath the skin of her hand like tree roots, and as her body physically reacts to the curse, the environment outside aggressively matches her terror. The sky instantly turns pitch black. Violent winds start shaking the pine trees, and massive waves begin crashing across what was a perfectly silent lake. The sheer scale of this supernatural reaction is just staggering. We go from violent winds and crashing waves to hundreds of black crows suddenly swarming and circling the farmhouse. Terrified out of her mind, Mia quickly wraps the book back up in that black cloth, shoves it behind the shelf, locks the garage, and retreats upstairs. And just minutes later, the storm breaks. The sky clears, the lake calms down, and the crows vanish as if they were never even there. But here is the crucial takeaway from this whole sequence. The environmental nightmare ended the second the book was hidden away again. But the physical corruption on Mia's body, those black root-like veins under her skin, they remained permanently etched into her hand. Completely exhausted from the emotional terror and the physical labor of cleaning all day, Mia actually manages to pass out into a really heavy sleep. But her rest is violently cut short. She's suddenly jolted awake by a blood-curdling scream coming from downstairs. The voice is completely desperate, echoing up through the empty, dark farmhouse, just crying out for help. Heart pounding, Mia slowly creeps down into the dining room, and she absolutely freezes. Sitting right there at the table is her grandfather, Richard, the exact same man who had been officially declared dead weeks ago. But he's a shell of his former self. He is horribly thin, his clothes are caked in thick, wet mud, and there are these deep, dark circles surrounding his petrified eyes. And perhaps most chilling of all, resting on the table right next to him is the very same cursed book Mia had locked in the garage. His eyes are just darting frantically to the windows, the ceiling, and every single dark corner of the room. Richard finally explains the horrific escalation of what happened to him years ago, and he outlines a textbook demonic haunting perfectly. Turns out, years ago, he too found that cursed book hidden behind the shelf. After reading it, an ancient entity was awakened inside the house. It's a 3-step process. Step 1, it started with whispers echoing in the empty rooms. Step 2, those whispers evolved into shifting shadows moving in the dark. And finally, step 3, the shadows actually manifested into horrifying creatures that cruelly took the shapes of the people he loved most. Completely unable to survive this psychological torture, Richard abandoned his own home and spent years hiding in an old muddy cabin near the lake. So, why break his hiding now? Well, Richard explains that from his spot by the lake, he saw the unnatural black storm roll in today. He saw the sky darken and the crows begin to circle. He knew instantly that someone had found and opened the book again, so he rushed back to try and save his granddaughter. But before he can even finish his warning to her, he stops dead and stares out the kitchen window. Out there, standing deep inside the dark forest, was a burned young woman silently watching the house. This is the moment the tension completely snaps. The demonic entity fully takes hold of the room. Black veins rapidly spread across Richard's neck. His eyes roll back, turning completely bone white. And without anyone even touching it, the cursed book on the table just violently opens by itself, its pages frantically flipping as if caught in an invisible windstorm. And as those pages turn, those terrifying dark red horror pics and symbols from the book begin magically projecting and burning themselves directly into the wooden walls of the farmhouse. The house itself feels alive with this incredibly dark energy. The cold fireplace spontaneously bursts into roaring flames. Mia, totally desperate to stop the madness, tries to slam the cursed book shut, but the moment her skin touches the leather, unbearable pain explodes through her hands as the black symbols aggressively spread up her arms. Meanwhile, the possessed Richard casually picks up a heavy iron candle holder. Boiling hot wax pours directly over his bare hands, but his stark white eyes show absolutely no pain. Safe to say, the grandfather Mia knew is completely gone, replaced by pure murder in his eyes as he slowly advances on her. Mia barely manages to shove Richard away just as he violently swings the iron candle holder. He crashes hard into the wall, and the burning candle instantly ignites the window curtains. Within seconds, the dry wooden farmhouse is entirely consumed by a raging inferno, trapping Richard inside. Mia sprints toward the kitchen window, planning to break through the glass and escape into the forest. But the burned woman is still standing out there. As Mia reaches the glass, she freezes. And this brilliantly illustrates the truly horrific twist of this narrative. She realized the burned woman wasn't a stranger out in the woods. It was her own burned reflection staring back at her from the window pane. A second later, the flames swallow Mia as well. When the local firefighters finally arrive at the scene, the towering inferno has already reduced the old farmhouse to a smoldering pile of ash. The police comb through the wreckage, and they do tragically find the deeply burned bodies of both Richard and Mia inside the debris. But out of the entire house, out of all the furniture, all the paperwork, and the massive structure itself, exactly one thing remained in the ashes. Just one. Resting on what was left of the dining room table, completely untouched by the massive fire that absolutely destroyed everything else, was the ancient Book of the Dead. It was completely unharmed. Think about the indestructible nature of this artifact. The dark stitched leather, the twisted tree roots, the horrifying face on the cover. Literally none of it was even singed. The demonic entity had consumed the home, claimed the lives of the family, and simply retreated back into its indestructible pages, just waiting. The source material leaves us with this final, incredibly unsettling thought. Some books are literally never meant to be opened, and some nightmares never truly end. Which brings us to our final provocative question for this explainer. If this cursed artifact cannot be destroyed by any natural means, and if it just sits there waiting in the ashes for a curious hand to brush off the soot, who will be the next to find it? It's a chilling reminder of the inescapable nature of this specific nightmare. Thank you so much for joining me for today's explainer. Keep your curiosity and check out there, and I'll see you next time.
And if you enjoyed this story, subscribe to USA Horror 01 for more terrifying horror stories.